What if I told you that the King of England had just delivered an ultimatum to his own son, not as a father, but as a monarch, not as a plea, but as a final warning? An ultimatum so cold, so calculated, it left Prince Harry absolutely speechless. This isn't speculation. It's not tabloid fantasy. According to insiders and leaked reports now sending shockwaves through both the UK and Hollywood, King Charles has drawn a hard line in the sand. A line that could either save the monarchy or fracture it beyond repair. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The choice? Prince Harry must either return to the United Kingdom and distance himself from his wife, Meghan Markle, or accept total exile. That's right, no royal duties, no titles for his children, no money, no second chances. But here's the twist, this didn't happen overnight. It's been quietly brewing for years. Underneath smiles at public events, behind tightly scripted royal statements, and beneath the surface of every tabloid war, the truth is, a storm has been building. And now, the crown is striking back. But the most shocking part? It wasn't Meghan's interviews, her Netflix deal, or even her memoir that triggered this response. It was a single act of betrayal, one that went too far. One that pushed King Charles, Prince William, Princess Anne, and Queen Camilla into agreement. An act that exposed just how far Meghan Markle was allegedly willing to go to control the narrative, even if it meant torching the reputation of the royal family in the process. And for Harry, it was the moment everything changed. Let's rewind, because to understand the gravity of this moment, this ultimatum, we need to go back to the early days of Megxit, to the quiet warning signs, to the late-night meetings, the media leaks, the spiraling breakdown of a family, one headline at a time. Remember when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle first stepped down as senior royals? They claimed they wanted a more peaceful life, that they'd been forced out, that their mental health was suffering. And for a while, many believed them. But what followed was a calculated campaign, a $100 million Netflix documentary trashing the firm, a bombshell Oprah interview full of half-truths and loaded accusations, a memoir titled Spare that didn't spare anyone. Not William, not Camilla, not even the late Queen. And yet, through all of it, King Charles remained silent, dignified, restrained. He let them rant. He let them tour the media. He let them claim victimhood as the monarchy held steady. But silence doesn't mean weakness. Because while Meghan was pushing for red carpets, podcast deals, and sympathy from Hollywood's elite, Charles was watching, waiting, listening. And so were the courtiers, the palisades, the legal advisors, the old-school aristocrats who remember exactly what happened the last time a royal married an American divorcee. Yes, we're talking about Wallis Simpson, the original scandal that rocked the monarchy to its core. But here's the thing. This time, the crown wasn't going to sit back and let history repeat itself. This time, there was a plan. Insiders now say that Charles, after years of diplomacy, second chances, and public grace, has finally activated it. And the trigger? A lie. One bold, public, deliberate falsehood that crossed the line from narrative building to outright sabotage. A lie about the royal family so inflammatory, so destructive, that it forced Buckingham Palace to hold a crisis meeting behind closed doors. Who was in the room? King Charles, Prince William, Queen Camilla, Princess Anne, and, crucially, none of the Sussexes. The goal of the meeting? To decide once and for all what should be done about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Not how to protect them, not how to bring them back, but how to cut them off with surgical precision before the entire institution crumbles. The result of that meeting? A letter, a message, a royal decree, call it what you want. But it was sent directly to Prince Harry. And inside, a stark choice. Return to the United Kingdom, abandon the narrative war, and distance yourself from Meghan Markle, or face permanent exile, loss of titles, and legal consequences. Let that sink in. A father telling his son to leave his wife, or else. But was it really just about Meghan? Or was this a move to save the monarchy, no matter the personal cost? Because if the reports are true, the letter doesn't just suggest a separation, it lays out financial implications, legal consequences, even the potential to block future inheritance. And as for Archie and Lilibet's titles? Frozen. Now, this might sound dramatic, But if you've been following the signs, it was inevitable. Let's talk about the damage Meghan has allegedly done to the crown's reputation. Multiple accusations of racism, with no proof. Staff members bullied and silenced. Private conversations weaponized in public interviews. And let's not forget the timing of everything. Major leaks or bombshell moments always seem to align with royal milestones, jubilee weekends, coronation announcements, even funerals. Coincidence? Or calculated sabotage? Because for years now, Meghan has painted herself as the victim, the outsider, the American who was never accepted. And Harry, poor, broken Harry, became her willing accomplice. But here's the problem. The British people have noticed the pattern, and so has the monarchy. Now, with Queen Camilla reportedly urging Charles to act, and William allegedly refusing to speak to Harry unless Meghan is out of the picture, Charles is taking action. Sources say this is his last olive branch. His final offer. Harry can return, quietly, privately, with dignity, but only if he agrees to separate his life from Meghan Markle and the media empire she's built on the ruins of royal scandal. And what happens if he doesn't? He loses everything. No security, no funding, no patronages, no legacy, no way back in. It's a move that could redefine the monarchy and destroy a family. But it doesn't stop there. Because if Meghan retaliates, and let's be honest, she will, the firm is reportedly prepared. Insiders whisper of a royal dossier, a secret file allegedly containing years' worth of damaging information, press manipulation, private recordings, signed NDAs, and more. If Meghan goes scorched earth, the crown might just go nuclear. So now we wait. We wait for Harry's answer. We wait to see whether love wins, or the monarchy does. We wait to see whether Harry is still a prince, or just another Hollywood outcast. Because behind the glitz of Montecito, behind the flashing lights of premieres and podcast launches, a royal war is about to erupt. And when it does, everyone, from Oprah to the palace, will be forced to pick a side. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the one thing you feared the world discovering was the very lie your own family weaponized against you? That's the question royal insiders claim was echoing through the halls of Buckingham Palace after a single, explosive claim from Meghan Markle reignited a media firestorm. But this wasn't just another allegation about protocol, skin color, or broken tiaras. No, this was the moment the dam broke. And at the heart of it, a bold accusation, cloaked in implication, delivered with a smile, that, according to multiple palace aides, never happened. So what was it? Let's rewind. The storm began brewing with an interview. Of course, right? This time it wasn't Oprah. It wasn't even Netflix. It was a low-key podcast, you know the kind, billed as a safe space for women, empowerment, authenticity. Meghan was a guest. The host was friendly. The vibe was casual. And then she said it, casually, almost as an afterthought. And when I was pregnant with Archie, someone at the palace actually suggested we might keep the baby out of the line of succession. Just not give him a title. Said it might be simpler. A pause. A knowing sigh. Then she moved on, like it was nothing. But in royal terms, that was a grenade. Let me explain why. Because that small sentence wasn't just a story. It was an accusation. A coded suggestion that the monarchy, the literal institution built on bloodlines and duty, had considered denying her son his birthright. Not because of protocol, not because of tradition, but because of who his mother was. And in doing so, Meghan lit the fuse on a question that has haunted the royals for decades. Is the monarchy secretly racist? Now, to the untrained ear, it sounded like a rehash. Didn't she already make similar claims in the Oprah interview? Wasn't there already a storm about skin tone conversations? Yes, and no. This was different. Because in this case, Meghan wasn't implying discomfort or confusion. She was implying premeditated action. That someone in the royal family actively considered cutting Archie out of the line of succession. Not just a title. His literal place in royal history. That, dear viewers, is a constitutional nightmare. And it was completely false. At least, according to every single royal advisor, legal expert, and constitutional scholar consulted by the palace in the days that followed. You see, the line of succession isn't something you can just tweak on a whim. It's enshrined in UK law. You can't remove someone from it without parliamentary approval, formal acts, and massive legal consequences. Even Charles, as king, cannot unilaterally declare a grandchild unworthy of succession. So for Meghan to suggest that someone was pushing this idea, it wasn't just misleading. It was dangerous. And this time, King Charles didn't just ignore it. He was livid. According to multiple insiders, this was the exact moment the palace snapped. Because this lie, this insinuation, went far beyond personal grievance. It didn't just accuse the family of bias. It accused the entire institution of being willing to bend the Constitution to exclude a biracial child. Do you see how far-reaching that is? How calculated? It's not just a jab at the royals. It's a challenge to British democracy, to the integrity of the constitutional monarchy itself. Now ask yourself, was that Meghan being careless with her words? Or was it intentional? Because here's what happened next. Within hours of that podcast going live, media outlets exploded. Front pages, pundits, think pieces. Twitter, X was ablaze. Hashtag abolish the monarchy began trending. Again, and once again, the crown found itself on the defensive without having actually done anything. But this time, the palace went into full lockdown mode. Crisis comms, legal reviews, internal memos. One senior royal aide, anonymously, of course, told a Times journalist, "If this continues, we will have no choice but to issue formal corrections. We cannot allow lies to stand unchallenged." This one crossed a line. But still, no public statement. Why? Because the monarchy plays a long game. And King Charles? He plays it with precision. Sources say he knew reacting too quickly would only escalate things. So instead, he gathered facts, met with legal counsel, reviewed transcripts, verified who was in the room during those alleged conversations. And guess what? There was no record of anyone, royal or staff, ever suggesting Archie be cut from the line of succession. Not in meetings, not in emails, not in passing conversation. Nothing. Worse still, Meghan had already been briefed about how the line of succession works, years ago. So either she forgot, or she lied. And that, dear audience, is when the king called the meeting. A private royal summit behind closed doors at Balmoral Castle. No press, no fanfare, just 4 key figures: Charles, Camilla, William, and Anne. The topic? Response strategy to ongoing reputational attacks from the Sussexes. Yes, that was the internal phrasing. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was institutional preservation. And the key issue on the table? Should the monarchy finally push back? And if so, how? Should they release proof? Issue a formal statement? Publicly refute the claim? Leak legal analysis to the press? And reportedly favored a quiet legal push. Camilla? She wanted fire and fury. Enough was enough. William? He allegedly said 6 words that stunned the room. She's not attacking us. She's erasing us. Think about that. Not hurting the family. Not damaging the institution. But erasing them. The implication? That Meghan's goal wasn't just exposure. It was destruction. And Harry, blind, complicit, or both, was helping her. But here's the emotional beat that caught even seasoned aides off guard. Charles, the father, the monarch, the man who's known for indecision and diplomacy, finally made a call. He said, quote, "Then we give him one chance. One final chance. The boy needs to decide what he wants to be, a husband or a prince." Let that settle in. That's not the voice of a grieving father. That's the tone of a king preparing for war. And it all started with a lie. A single sentence on a podcast that sparked outrage across the world, but more importantly, awakened something cold and ruthless within the palace. Now, of course, Meghan's supporters came to her defense. They argued she was misunderstood, that she never explicitly accused anyone of removing Archie from the line, that it was just how she felt. But here's the contradiction. Meghan is a woman who prides herself on being media savvy, scripted, strategic, every word carefully chosen. So when she says something that's specific on a recorded show with global reach, she knows exactly what she's doing. And this time, it backfired. Because while she may have won another news cycle, she triggered something far more dangerous. A king's resolve, a brother's silence, a family's final limit. And as the Balmoral meeting ended, as the private jets flew back to London, as the senior royals returned to their roles, a letter was being drafted. Its destination? Prince Harry. Its content? A decision. a countdown, and a choice that would shake the House of Windsor like never before. Because this time, it wasn't just about protecting the firm's reputation. It was about survival. But what came next would push even Harry beyond the breaking point and leave the world questioning everything they thought they knew. What really happens when a royal family decides to protect itself from one of its own? Not in theory, not in fiction, but in cold, calculated reality, with titles, legacies, and 1,000 years of history on the line? Because after Meghan's explosive podcast allegation, the one suggesting Archie was almost written out of royal succession, King Charles didn't just get angry. He assembled his war council. And what followed wasn't just a family conversation. It was a full-blown crisis summit inside the walls of Balmoral Castle. Private, silent, deadly serious. A meeting that could alter the fate of the monarchy forever. Here's how it began. It was a crisp Sunday morning in Scotland. Fog clung to the Highland Hills as a discreet convoy of black Range Rovers pulled through the rear gates of Balmoral. Inside the vehicles, not just aides, not just security, four of the most powerful figures in the royal family. King Charles III, now firmly settled on the throne, no longer a waiting heir but a man prepared to wield his crown. Queen Camilla, underestimated for years, but now a central force in palace decision-making. Princess and the iron-willed royal known for her loyalty to the institution and zero tolerance for drama. Prince William, the heir, the future, and perhaps the most emotionally burned by his brother's choices. No Meghan, no Harry. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was strategy. Now, according to insiders, the meeting was already scheduled in vague terms, a routine royal gathering. But the urgency had escalated rapidly after Meghan's latest remarks went viral. Charles had called for discretion and precision. But behind the scenes, tensions were already boiling over. The first 30 minutes were reportedly awkward. Tea served, formalities exchanged. But as soon as the doors closed, the gloves came off. The Queen spoke first. Camilla reportedly turned to Charles and said, point blank, "If we don't draw the line now, they'll burn the whole house down, with us in it." A shocking statement? Not for those who've watched Camilla's evolution. For years, she was the royal scapegoat, vilified for her role in the Charles-Diana saga. Mocked, maligned, misrepresented. But she survived it all, with one rule. Stay silent, stay steady, survive. But now, silence was no longer an option. Because Meghan wasn't just pushing narratives. According to Camilla and her advisors, she was crossing into something more dangerous, constitutional sabotage. Camilla warned that the monarchy's passive response was feeding the beast, that the press was circling like vultures, smelling weakness, that Harry and Meghan were writing history in real time, unchecked, unchallenged. Then, and chimed in, and when and speaks, people listen. Princess Royal, the Queen's daughter. The one royal with the highest number of official engagements per year, and not a single scandal to her name. Her words were blunt. "We've allowed them too much grace," she reportedly said. "Grace without consequence becomes permission. And we've all seen what they do with permission." Oof. The room went still. William? He remained quiet. But not for long. When he did speak, it was chilling. He didn't rage. He didn't explode. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply leaned forward and said, "They've declared war. We've been pretending it's a family feud. It's not. It's a siege. Let that sink in." Because that's when the tone of the meeting shifted completely. From personal grievance to national security. Why? Because the monarchy isn't just family drama. It's diplomacy. It's military leadership. It's Commonwealth relations. Billions in tourism, trade, soft power, and stability. When Meghan casts the crown as racist, cruel, or corrupt, the damage isn't just internal. It hits global trust, economic alliances, and the monarchy's moral authority. And that's when Charles made the decision. No more appeasement. No more waiting. No more hoping they'll stop. A formal plan was needed. And that's exactly what they began drafting in that very room. The operation was given a private code name, Project Sky. Here's what insiders say it included. Phase 1, the ultimatum letter. A direct message to Prince Harry. Personal, stern, and final. No threats. No anger. Just a clear choice laid out in cold terms. Return to the UK, realign with royal duty, and distance yourself from further public attacks. or lose all remaining ties to the institution. This included freezing royal funds, suspending honorary military appointments, withdrawing public support for security, and yes, initiating the legal process to remove Duke and Duchess titles if necessary. Brutal? Maybe, but from their perspective, necessary. Phase 2. Public positioning. The palace wouldn't launch a full assault. That would look desperate. Instead, they would begin positioning through anonymous briefings, strategic leaks, and well-timed public statements, vague enough to be diplomatic, sharp enough to land. Every word carefully calibrated. Every nod to protocol backed by law. Every implication designed to expose contradiction without overtly naming names. Phase 3. Contingency defense. This part is murky, but crucial. Should Meghan retaliate? Via new interviews, lawsuits, or revelations, the palace was preparing its own cache of evidence. Multiple courtiers have privately hinted that the royals have documentation. Emails, text messages, memos from staff, even NDAs signed by former employees who allegedly witnessed Meghan's private behavior, much of which, if released, could shatter her public image. They didn't want to use it, but they were prepared. And then came the most emotional moment of the entire meeting. Charles, ever the soft-spoken father beneath the regalia, paused, looked down, and reportedly said, "He's still my son, but this cannot continue. If he's unwilling to return, we must let him go." There it was. Grief, resignation, but clarity, because the monarchy wasn't just reacting anymore. It was moving, strategically, carefully, deliberately. And as the meeting closed, 4 royals stepped out of that private room with a shared understanding. They would offer Harry one last chance. Not because they believed he would take it, but because they wanted the world to see that they tried, that he chose the path, that he made the final decision. They were documenting everything, every effort, every opportunity extended in good faith, so that when the hammer finally dropped, no one could say the crown hadn't tried to keep the family whole. And that, perhaps, is the greatest tragedy of all. Because the moment they left that room, something else happened. A letter was drafted. A letter that would leave Prince Harry stunned, cornered, and silent. But before it reached his hands, before it even left the palace courier's pouch, Meghan made her next move. And it was one that caught even the most seasoned royal aides completely off guard. Because while the firm was preparing for quiet war, Meghan was preparing for all-out blitz. And what she did next would send shockwaves from Montecito to Mayfair, shaking even King Charles's resolve. But what came next would expose a terrifying new reality. This wasn't just about family anymore. It was a full-blown power play, and only one side would survive it. What do you do when the most powerful monarchy in the world draws a line in the sand? If you're Meghan Markle, you don't just cross it. You set up cameras, call your publicist, and sprint toward it with a media plan. Because even as King Charles finalized the private letter to Harry, the one delivering the ultimate royal ultimatum, Meghan had already launched her next move. A strategic counterattack. A full-blown PR blitz aimed not just at winning public sympathy, but at reframing the entire narrative before the crown could act. But here's the kicker. It didn't go the way she planned. In fact, it backfired spectacularly. Let's break it down. The setup. Sources close to the Sussex camp confirmed that Meghan caught wind of something big brewing in the UK. Perhaps through back channels. Perhaps through Harry himself. Either way, she knew the tides were shifting. And in true California fashion, she responded not with a family phone call, but with a media campaign. The goal? Preempt the royal narrative. Flood the headlines. Trigger outrage. Control the public conversation. This wasn't a coincidence. This was timing. She booked a series of carefully curated appearances. Not hard-hitting interviews. That would risk real questions. But soft landings. A curated empowerment panel here. A last-minute Zoom feature for a women's charity there. Even a surprise cover shoot, inspired by her personal truth. And the key messaging? You guessed it. Victimhood. Isolation. Unfair treatment by the establishment. Subtle digs at royal silence. Not naming names, but letting the audience fill in the blanks. And then came the kicker. A brand new podcast teaser, dropped out of nowhere, hinting at a new series titled Unfiltered. Its tagline, "Every woman has a story, and some were never allowed to tell it." Coincidence? Please. Everyone knew who never allowed her to speak, was supposed to be. Everyone knew who the villain of this unfiltered narrative was going to be. But this time, the audience didn't clap. The shift in public reaction. Here's where things got interesting. For the first time since Megxit, Meghan's media machine hit resistance. The British tabloids weren't buying it. Neither were the broadsheets. But more surprisingly, neither were American outlets. Headlines turned passive-aggressive. Meghan hints at new scandals amid fresh royal tensions. Coincidence? Timing or tactics? Duchess drops podcast promo as palace crisis swirls. Meghan reclaims her voice, but at what cost? Subtext: everyone saw through it. The victim card had been played too many times. The martyr act? Losing its shine. And the comment sections? Brutal. Viewers asked, why now? Why keep attacking the family she left? Why not move on if she's so free? Even former fans began to turn. And the most unexpected backlash? Hollywood. According to entertainment insiders, Meghan's PR team had pitched exclusive content deals off the back of the coming podcast, shopping it to streaming platforms and legacy media. But executives were skittish. One Netflix producer allegedly declined, stating, "She's becoming too polarizing. Every time we platform her, we get flooded with backlash from both sides." And another streaming exec said bluntly, "We're not here to fund her family feud. If the royals clap back legally, we don't want to be dragged in." Ouch. This wasn't the reaction Meghan expected. She thought she was seizing control of the story. Instead, she reignited scrutiny and gave the crown exactly what it needed. Proof of aggression. The palace responds, quietly, brutally. Buckingham Palace didn't issue a press release. They didn't need to. Instead, they let the headlines do the work. Behind the scenes, trusted royal correspondents were quietly briefed. Not with quotes, not with sound bites, with context. One senior palace source reportedly told The Telegraph, "The king has been measured. He has been fair. But there is a limit to how long the institution can endure personal attacks under the guise of empowerment." Translation: we see what you're doing, Meghan. We're documenting everything. Even more chilling? The palace quietly leaked one key fact. The timeline of the royal letter to Harry predated Meghan's podcast teaser. In other words, this wasn't retaliation. It was a response. And suddenly, the media narrative shifted again. No longer was Charles the cold-hearted monarch. He was the man pushed too far. The father trying to hold a crumbling institution together. The king forced to choose country over kin. Meghan, meanwhile, looked desperate. Even some of her diehard supporters admitted the optics were unfortunate. But Meghan didn't stop. Because here's the part no one expected. She doubled down. The second wave. Days after the initial PR push failed to gain traction, Meghan's team leaked a new claim. Unnamed sources close to the Duchess whispered to entertainment outlets that she had concerns for her personal safety, following targeted leaks from the palace. No evidence provided. No names given. Just fear. Just implication. The intent? Shift the story again. Cast herself as the hunted, the threatened, the wronged woman once more. But again, the move misfired. Security experts publicly debunked the danger narrative, and royal reporters called it out for what it was: deflection. One commentator said on live TV, "It's getting absurd. Every time the palace takes one step toward accountability, Meghan cries danger. You can't weaponize the press and then claim to be its victim." The tide was turning. And then came the final straw. The podcast clip that made things worse. 2 weeks later, Meghan's production company quietly dropped a 90-second preview clip of her upcoming podcast. And in it, she delivered a vague but unmistakable jab at the monarchy. She said, "Sometimes you're born into a story that doesn't want to include you. Sometimes the crown was never meant to fit your head, not because it doesn't, but because it wasn't designed for someone like you." Boom. The internet erupted, and not in her favor. Critics called it passive-aggressive, inflammatory, and manipulative. Royal historians pointed out the irony. Meghan married into the monarchy. She wasn't excluded, she entered by choice. The palace? Silent. Again. But now, insiders say that Charles took that quote and placed it on his desk as a final straw. Because the moment she implied the monarchy itself was built to exclude people like her, she wasn't just attacking family anymore. She was attacking the crown's very existence. And for a constitutional monarchy trying to maintain unity during political unrest, economic struggles, and post-Brexit instability. That was a line too far. So Charles finalized the letter. No more edits. And this time, it was hand-delivered. To Harry. Alone. Because the king didn't want Meghan to see it first. And what was inside that envelope? A choice. A countdown. A decision that would not only affect Harry's future, but the very legacy of the House of Windsor. But what happened when Harry finally opened it? What did the letter say? And how did Meghan react when she found out, after the fact? Let's just say, the fallout was louder than anyone predicted. What happens when a monarch decides to lawyer up against his own son? Because make no mistake, the moment that envelope was delivered to Prince Harry, the one that laid out the consequences, the ultimatum, the fork in the road, King Charles wasn't just acting as a disappointed father. He was moving like a head of state preparing for war. And the most revealing detail? He didn't just send a letter. He consulted a team of top-tier royal legal advisors behind closed doors. Privately. Discreetly. Some say even secretly, because not even William was briefed on all the specifics. This wasn't just emotion anymore. It was legal strategy. Because Charles knew one thing above all. If Meghan retaliated, and she would, it had to be bulletproof. The palace's legal brain trust. Now, here's something the public rarely hears about. The royal household doesn't just operate on pageantry and tradition. Behind the gilded halls and velvet curtains is a full-blown legal apparatus, known as the Royal Household Solicitor's Office. This team, small but elite, has one job: to protect the legal integrity of the monarchy. And for this task, Charles didn't just rely on the internal team. He reportedly called in a group of external constitutional lawyers, handpicked and vetted through centuries-old royal networks. Some of these advisors have worked on everything from abdication clauses to parliamentary succession. One of them, according to leaked insider accounts, had even been involved in the Queen's legal affairs during the Diana years. This wasn't about PR anymore. It was about precedent, about property, about power. And here's what Charles allegedly told them in that first off-the-books meeting. I need to know how far I can go without destabilizing the crown. Boom. What was on the table? Let's look at what King Charles was reportedly exploring, and why it shocked even the most seasoned legal minds in the room. 1. Title removal, Duke and Duchess of Sussex. On paper, revoking a title sounds simple, but it's not. Royal dukedoms are granted by the monarch, yes, but they're deeply tied to peerage law. Removing one requires either a formal order in council or an act of parliament. And Charles? He didn't want this to be a show trial. He wanted to do it quietly, legally, and with minimal backlash. So the lawyers got to work drafting potential orders. Quiet memos. Precedent cases. If the line was crossed, if Meghan went nuclear, the paperwork would already be waiting. 2. Financial severance, trusts, and inheritances. Now this is where things get real. Because many assume that Harry and Meghan are cut off financially. But the truth? Several trust funds and legacy assets still linger in Harry's name, including property access, investment vehicles, and dormant accounts tied to Diana's estate and the Duchy of Cornwall. And while Charles cannot retroactively erase Diana's legacy, he can limit access to joint assets, freeze discretionary trusts, and redirect inheritance flows within legal parameters. So guess what he asked the lawyers? Can I restructure assets to ensure public funds and sovereign legacy do not flow to Montecito? Translation: can we cut them out without a messy courtroom fight? The answer? Yes, but only with precise timing. Which leads to 3. Custodial influence over Archie and Lilibet's royal status. Brace yourself, because this is the most explosive element in the consultation. Charles allegedly inquired whether there was any legal precedent, under UK law, to influence the citizenship or royal classification of his grandchildren, born in America, but still in the royal line. He wanted to know, can the palace deny or defer HRH titles beyond current protocol? Can the monarchy formally exclude them from royal events or roles? Could they be removed from the line of succession if Harry remains in exile? Now, legally, this is incredibly complicated. The line of succession is set in stone unless Parliament intervenes. But titles? That's discretionary. And under the letters patent of 1917, issued by King George V, only the children of the sovereign, the children of the sons of the sovereign, and the eldest living son of the Prince of Wales are automatically entitled to HRH status. Archie and Lilibet could be elevated, but Charles could choose not to grant that elevation. And according to multiple legal scholars consulted during the session, the king was well within his rights to keep those titles in limbo indefinitely. The word they reportedly used? Suspension. Not a denial. Not a revocation. Just pending. The Meghan clause. Now here's where it gets even more strategic. King Charles allegedly asked his lawyers about a clause that would later be referred to, informally, of course, as the Meghan clause. The idea? Any future royal access, inheritance, title restoration, or ceremonial participation would be contingent on Harry's permanent separation from Meghan. Let me repeat that. The king was exploring a legal mechanism that would only allow Harry back into the fold if Meghan was out. Think that's harsh? Well, consider what prompted it. At that point, Meghan had launched multiple documentaries, podcast attacks, and indirect allegations, all while profiting off the Sussex brand, which is a royal title. From the palace's perspective, this was trademark exploitation, so they had to act. The Meghan clause, as one aide put it, was not about divorce per se, but about distancing the crown from Meghan's commercial apparatus. Any continued association would taint the institution further. And if Harry didn't sever the tie, then he'd be out too, permanently. Behind the curtains, Charles's emotional conflict. Now, you might be thinking, this all sounds cold, clinical, legal chess moves. But inside that meeting, Charles reportedly struggled. Multiple witnesses say he sat for a full 10 minutes in silence, reading a document about Meghan's past press attacks. Then, he said something that stunned even his legal team. He whispered, "He used to ask me about birds in the garden. Now I barely recognize him." There it is. The father, the hurt, the heartbreak, but also the king. Forced to think in terms of legacy, not love. And it was that emotional split, father versus monarch, that ultimately drove Charles to finalize the next step. He signed the envelope, the real one, the final letter to Harry. The letter is sealed, but Meghan intercepts the message. And here's the twist. Charles intended for Harry to receive it alone. But Meghan? She got to it first. According to insiders, the letter was hand-delivered by a palace courier to a trusted staffer in Montecito, who, following usual protocol, gave it to Meghan to pass on. But she opened it, and when she read what was inside, she exploded. What followed, according to one source close to the Sussex household, was a full-scale meltdown. Screaming, accusations, threats. She called her lawyers. She called her publicist. She allegedly even tried to call Charles directly, but was blocked. And that's when Meghan made the fateful decision. She wasn't going to let Harry decide. She would. But what did she do? How did Harry react? And what ultimatum did Meghan deliver to him in return? Let's just say, when Harry finally read the letter, he wasn't the same man who entered that Montecito mansion hours earlier. What would you do if your father, your king, asked you to leave the woman you love? Would you fight? Would you cry? Would you choose family or freedom? For Prince Harry, that impossible decision arrived inside a thick, cream-colored envelope embossed with the royal crest and lined with centuries of expectation. But before he ever touched it, Meghan had already read it, and that changed everything. Because this wasn't just a private letter from father to son. It was a royal ultimatum, a final warning, a declaration of what comes next and what will be taken away. And the content? It hit like a guillotine. The moment Harry saw the envelope. It was mid-afternoon in Montecito. Sunny skies, palm trees swaying, the illusion of paradise. Harry was upstairs in his home office, headphones on, flipping through press clippings, some favorable, most not. When Meghan walked in, he didn't look up at first. Then she placed the envelope on the desk. No words, just silence. When he finally turned to look, he saw the royal crest, unmistakable, heavy with history. He froze. His first words? When did this come? Meghan's response. This morning. I've read it. Instant tension. Harry's face, already pale, went rigid. That was for me. But Meghan didn't apologize, because what was written inside had already ignited something in her. Fury, fear, or maybe strategy. She didn't want him to read it in private. She wanted to be in the room. What the letter said. According to leaked details from a senior palace aide, the letter, written by King Charles himself, and co-signed by a royal legal representative, was precise, painful, and without ambiguity. Here's a breakdown of what was reportedly inside. 1. Reaffirmation of the crown's position. As sovereign, I write not only as your father, but as the guardian of the crown's legacy. The recent public remarks from your household have caused significant harm to the institution which your birthright belongs to. Boom. No sugarcoating. This wasn't a note of reconciliation. This was the preamble to a line being drawn. 2. A direct call to return. You are invited, formally and privately, to return to the United Kingdom and resume your royal responsibilities. A full restoration of duties, under adjusted conditions, awaits you. This offer is extended solely to you, and not to your spouse. Wait, not to Meghan? Correct. Charles made it clear. This wasn't an olive branch to both. It was a lifeline to Harry, alone. 3. Terms of separation from Meghan. Should you accept this offer, it will require your full withdrawal from all current commercial endeavors and any media engagements connected to your wife's enterprise. This includes, but is not limited to, joint interviews, documentary participation, and shared publishing projects. Translation: cut the cord or stay in exile. 4. Timeline and consequences. This offer shall remain open for a period of 90 days. Failure to respond within this period will be interpreted as a permanent abdication of your royal status, including potential review of all titles, ceremonial privileges, and inheritance considerations. In bold, underlined, a countdown had officially begun. Harry's reaction. When he read the letter, finally, fully, Harry went silent. He read it once, then again. Meghan, sitting across from him, watched his every blink. And then came the only thing Harry could muster. He means it. Meghan didn't speak, because she knew he was right. This wasn't theater. This wasn't a ploy for headlines. This was Charles at his coldest. Clear, royal, constitutional. For the first time in years, Harry felt like a prince again, not in privilege, but in pressure, because the clock had started ticking. And the decision wasn't just about titles anymore. It was about identity. Meghan's countermove. But before Harry could even process it, Meghan leaned forward, eyes locked, and delivered her own ultimatum. Yes, you heard that right. She gave him an ultimatum. According to a source familiar with the private conversation, Meghan said, "If you go back, I'm not coming with you." Silence. Then she added, "And I won't wait for you either." Let that sink in, because this wasn't just hurt feelings. This was strategy. Meghan saw the writing on the wall. She knew Charles had weaponized time, that every day Harry delayed responding would only weaken his position. So she threw the first stone, not to lose him, but to force him to choose. And the emotional trap was genius. If Harry accepted Charles's offer, he'd be branded as abandoning the woman who stood by him through everything. But if he rejected it, he'd lose his father, his homeland, and his royal legacy, possibly forever. It was a no-win scenario, and Meghan knew it. The internal war begins. Over the next 48 hours, Harry reportedly spiraled. Insiders claim he didn't leave the house. He canceled calls. He ignored his security team. He even missed a scheduled Zoom call with an Archwell charity partner, without explanation. Because how do you explain to the world that your father has asked you to leave your wife? That your family wants you back? Only if you come alone? And how do you explain to your wife that staying with her might cost your children their royal titles? Friends who spoke to him say he was like a man trapped in two realities. The California freedom he chose, and the royal duty he never really escaped. He said things like, "What happens if I go back and they don't forgive me? What if this is all just to humiliate me? What if Meghan's right, and they're trying to isolate me again?" Paranoia, doubt, nostalgia, pain, but above all, regret. William's silent signal. Now here's where it gets even more emotional. According to a source inside Kensington Palace, William, who had refused to speak directly with Harry for over a year, broke the silence. No, not with a call. With a letter, delivered through private channels. The content? Brief, cold, but significant. You know where I stand. You know what you need to do. No more time. No love. No softness. Just clarity. And that, in its own way, shook Harry more than Charles's letter. Because William wasn't just his brother. He was the one person who knew everything. The childhood, the trauma, the guilt, the fear. And if he wasn't reaching out with empathy, It meant time had truly run out. What Meghan feared most. Now let's switch lenses for a second. Because Meghan, behind the confident press appearances, the polished Instagram captions, the glamorous photo shoots, was scared. Not of Charles, but of something far worse. Losing control of the narrative. If Harry returned without her, even temporarily, she knew what would happen. The British press would go wild. The royalists would claim victory. Palace staff would leak stories, reframe timelines, and start rehabilitating Harry's image without her. And within weeks, she'd be rebranded not as the brave escapee, but the manipulator who nearly ruined a prince. So what did she do? She began preparing for the next move. A move that would change the power dynamic completely and potentially destroy her relationship with the crown forever. Because Meghan had one more card to play. One that no royal lawyer, no palace aide, not even King Charles himself could have predicted. And she was about to play it. Live, global, and unfiltered. But what came next wasn't just bold. It was dangerous. What do you do when the royal family wants to cut you out and your husband starts hesitating? If you're Meghan Markle, you don't wait for the crown to move. You move first. And not quietly. Because while the palace was calculating legal strategies and Harry was battling a personal crisis, Meghan was already setting the stage for her next act. One that had nothing to do with tiaras, titles, or tradition. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about rebranding. A full-blown Hollywood rebound plan. Equal parts revenge, reinvention, and ruthless ambition. And trust me, the plan was already in motion long before Charles's ultimatum letter even landed in California. Let's unpack how Meghan's next media play was designed to do one thing. Survive the monarchy and surpass it. Step 1. Cut Harry out of the spotlight. This might sound shocking. But behind the scenes, insiders say that Meghan had already begun distancing her public image from Harry months before the royal ultimatum dropped. How? Subtle but surgical moves. Podcast pitches featuring just Meghan, solo narratives, no mention of Harry. Invitations to women's empowerment panels where Harry was not invited or included. Photo shoots and fashion features focused on Meghan's style, activism, and post-royal identity. And then there was the most telling move. The relaunch of her personal lifestyle brand. That's right. Multiple trademarks had been quietly filed for products under Meghan's name, not the Sussexes. Skincare, apparel, cookbooks, podcasts, media content, all branded around her, not them. Even insiders close to Archewell noticed it. One former employee reportedly told a journalist, "We used to get press inquiries about the couple. Now they're all about her. She's separating the brands. It's calculated." So when Charles's letter gave Harry a 90-day countdown to return home, with Meghan clearly excluded, she didn't panic. She pivoted. Step 2. Activate this solo Duchess narrative. Now here's where the real PR brilliance kicked in. Meghan knows how the media works, and she knew that if Harry returned to the UK, even temporarily, the press would feast on the split. So she got ahead of it. She began leaking whispers through anonymous friends and sources close to the Duchess to sympathetic outlets. Phrases like, "Meghan has always been strong on her own. She never needed the palace. She just wanted peace. Hollywood respects her for walking away from toxicity. And my personal favorite? She's writing her own fairy tale, this time without a castle. Subtle, poetic, and strategic as hell. This wasn't damage control. It was narrative judo. By framing herself as the independent woman, the survivor, the builder, the brand, she flipped the potential backlash on its head. Suddenly, if Harry left, she wouldn't be the woman left behind. She'd be the woman moving forward. And audiences, especially in LA and New York, they ate it up. Step 3. New projects, new power players. Now this is where it gets really interesting. While Charles was in legal consultations, Meghan was doing her own with Hollywood producers. According to multiple industry sources, Meghan had already begun shopping 2 new TV and film concepts. This time without any mention of Archewell or Harry. One of them? A docuseries about women breaking out of systems that tried to control them. Another? A scripted drama loosely inspired by, wait for it, a mixed-race American woman navigating the politics of marrying into a powerful European family. Subtle? Not even trying to be. She met with Netflix, Hulu, and even Apple TV+. And one insider claimed, she's framing herself as a new kind of global icon. Not royal, not celebrity, but something between. She wants to be Oprah, Angelina, and Michelle Obama rolled into one. Ambitious? Absolutely. But here's the wild part. Some execs are biting. Despite the royal feud fatigue, the industry knows one truth. Meghan sells. She trends. She provokes. She divides. And in media? That's currency. But there was one condition from some studios. Harry can't be involved. Too quiet. Too moody. Too risky. So what did Meghan do? She nodded, smiled, and left him off the call sheets. Step 4. The secret plan to launch in Europe without the royals. While everyone focused on her Montecito moves, Meghan had a secondary PR route being mapped out in Europe. Yes, Europe. The same continent she once accused of systemic royal hostility. Why? Because, strategically, Europe offers soft power without the monarchy. She reportedly began exploring partnerships with high-end fashion houses in France and Italy, humanitarian orgs based in Switzerland and Spain, media groups looking to expand into transatlantic feminism. There were even whispers that her team reached out to the Dior Foundation for a possible ambassador role. A Meghan Markle Duchess of Hearts tour without a single crown involved. Think about that. A shadow royal tour, staged outside the palace's control, but using the same optics. Handshakes, speeches, children's hospitals, humanitarian causes. A royal in all but name. And for someone who once claimed the system was oppressive, it's a brilliant inversion. She wasn't rejecting royalty. She was reinventing it, on her terms. The emotional toll on Harry. While Meghan was building her empire, Harry was unraveling. Sources close to him say he became visibly withdrawn during meetings. Distracted. Avoidant. His team was under pressure to respond to Charles's letter. Reporters were asking questions. Family friends were texting. And Meghan? She wasn't slowing down to wait for him. One former palace aide now working in LA reportedly said, "It's like watching someone realize they've been outmaneuvered in their own marriage. He looks like a man realizing the plan was never his." Because whether you think Meghan is manipulative or misunderstood, one thing is undeniable. She's not waiting around to be sidelined. If Harry returns, she's ready to dominate the narrative alone. If he stays, she has a full Hollywood machine at her fingertips. And if he hesitates, she's already launched without him. The unexpected warning from an old friend. But just as Meghan's rebound plan was hitting its stride, she got a phone call. From an unlikely source. A former friend of Harry's. Someone who'd remained silent during the Megxit drama. Someone close to William, but not yet frozen out by Meghan. And their message? Short. Chilling. He's thinking about taking the deal. Boom. For the first time, Meghan realized something dangerous. All her power plays, media planning, and solo rebranding might have pushed Harry too far. She thought he'd never go back, never leave her behind. But now, he might. And that terrified her. Because if he left, the entire foundation of her brand, the royal link, the outsider narrative, the prince-turned-ally, would crumble. She had built everything on him walking away from the crown. If he walked back, she'd become the woman who lost a prince and then blamed the palace. Not the heroine, not the rebel, just history. And that wasn't in the script. So she made a call. To her lawyers. To Oprah's team. To her inner circle of influencers. She wasn't just going to wait and see what Harry chose. She was going to force the next chapter herself. Because if Harry was even considering going home, she'd make sure the world knew why he shouldn't. What came next wasn't just a counterattack. It was a detonation. What if I told you the palace had a file? Not just rumors. Not just whispers. A full-blown dossier, locked behind high-security doors, compiled over years, and allegedly stacked with evidence that could destroy Meghan Markle's public image in minutes. It sounds like a movie, right? But according to several former palace aides and royal correspondents, the so-called Meghan file is very real. And now, with Charles's ultimatum delivered, with Meghan mobilizing Hollywood for a scorched-earth comeback, with Harry sitting on the edge of a life-altering decision, the firm is preparing to use it. Because make no mistake, this is no longer a war of words. It's a war of evidence. What is the dossier? Let's start with what we know. According to multiple sources, including 2 former senior royal staffers interviewed off the record, the dossier was first assembled in 2019 long before Megxit. Why? Because Meghan had already raised red flags inside the palace. Staff were quitting. Media leaks were multiplying. Internal complaints were surfacing about Meghan's conduct behind closed doors. But Buckingham Palace couldn't act impulsively. They had to protect the institution, which means documenting everything. So, a special team was discreetly tasked with collecting memos, testimonies, incident reports, communications with outside press, even metadata from phone records and emails obtained through formal internal reviews. And over time, it grew. They called it, unofficially, the Markle File. But its real name, in palace documentation, was chillingly clinical. Subject 31. Internal Observations. Subject 31. That's Meghan. What's reportedly inside the file? Let's break it down, section by section, based on sources who've seen it, touched it, or helped compile it. 1. Staff complaints and witness statements. At least 5 formal complaints were filed against Meghan by royal staff between 2018 and 2020. These include accusations of bullying, verbal aggression, controlling behavior, emotional manipulation. One palace aide wrote in an internal memo, "I am not able to perform my duties effectively under the Duchess's management style. The environment is hostile, and I am fearful of retaliation." Another claimed she was reduced to tears after being berated over a minor scheduling conflict. Multiple staffers reportedly resigned specifically because of Meghan, not because of the royal workload. These statements were signed, time-stamped, and stored, but never publicly released. Why? Because the Queen, at the time, insisted on dignity through silence. But Charles? Not so patient. 2. Press coordination logs. Here's where it gets dicey. The dossier allegedly contains records of communications between Meghan's unofficial media reps and at least 3 major tabloid journalists in the US and UK, while she was still claiming media victimhood. What does that mean? It means Meghan was allegedly leaking stories while publicly denouncing the press. Stories about Kate, about Charles, even about Harry himself. According to one entry in the file, contact confirmed with redacted at US outlet regarding pre-Megxit positioning. Source request originated from Sussex Comms team under alternative name. Topic: Emotional abandonment in the palace. Translation: Her team was feeding emotional angles to tabloids, while condemning those same tabloids for invading her privacy. Let that contradiction settle in. 3. NDAs and legal conflicts. The file reportedly includes signed non-disclosure agreements from former staff and vendors, stylists, photographers, even caterers, all of whom had encounters with Meghan that raised concern. One notable entry? An NDA signed by a former assistant, who later tried to sue for workplace harassment and was quietly paid to drop the complaint. That payment allegedly came from a private account, not royal funds. And that's important because it suggests Charles may have paid out of pocket to keep it quiet at the time, but not anymore. 4. Private audio recordings. Yes, you read that correctly. There are reportedly private voice memos stored in the file, not of Meghan, but of staff documenting conversations immediately after they occurred for legal accuracy. One of the recordings allegedly details a verbal altercation between Meghan and a communications aide in 2020, where she threatened to ruin reputations if the palace didn't publicly back her. The staffer's voice is calm, but shaken. In the memo, she says, "She told me, if they don't back me, I'll make sure the whole thing burns down. Don't test me." Is it admissible in court? Probably not. Is it damning in the court of public opinion? Absolutely. Why hasn't it been released yet? Simple. Because the palace has always operated on one rule. Never complain, never explain. But Charles is modernizing the monarchy, and with Meghan gearing up for a full-scale media assault, potentially naming names, weaponizing interviews, and pushing Harry to publicly reject the ultimatum, the palace may no longer see discretion as strength. According to a well-placed royal insider, if she goes nuclear, the king has every intention of releasing what's necessary to protect the crown. Let that hang for a moment. If she goes nuclear, in other words, Meghan makes the next move, but the palace holds the detonator. Camilla and secret involvement. You want a twist? Multiple insiders claim that Queen Camilla and Princess Anne were instrumental in pushing Charles to revisit the file. And, reportedly, was furious after Meghan's recent podcast teaser, the one where she said, "Some crowns were never meant for women like me." Insiders say and told Charles, "She's not talking about the press. She's talking about us." Camilla, too, has kept quiet for years, enduring subtle jabs and passive-aggressive shade from the Sussexes. But behind the scenes, she's been lobbying Charles to take off the gloves. And now, they've both agreed. If Meghan drags the monarchy into another televised media war, the file goes public. Meghan gets wind of the file. But here's where it gets even more dramatic. Somehow, perhaps through a sympathetic ex-staffer or mutual contact, Meghan learns about the dossier's existence. And when she does, she panics. According to a source inside her LA circle, Meghan allegedly made an emergency call to her lawyers. "I need to know what they have. I need to see it. We can't let this happen." She even, reportedly, reached out again to Oprah's team, hinting that a clarifying interview might be necessary to correct false royal narratives. And that's when Harry walked in. Harry learns about the file. Until this point, Harry was unaware of the scope of the dossier. But now, he's faced with something terrifying. A mountain of documentation about the woman he married, prepared by the family he left behind. Insiders claim Harry was stunned, shaken. One source said he asked his team if any of it could be real.